Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Cutlass Podcast, audio and video versions. Uh, I hope this finds everyone doing well. If you're a new listener or a video watcher on YouTube, welcome. I hope you enjoy what you're about to hear and see. My goal is to make you more sturdy, versatile, incredible leader and manager, or remain one for those who have been in a position for a while. Because as I've talked about in prior episodes, just because you learn something, you're effective at a certain level of leadership as you move up in an organization or into a different role or position in a different company. How you use leadership and your management skills does change and evolve. So I encourage you to be a lifelong learner. There's never a I have arrived minute as a leader or a manager, and we'll probably talk about that with our guest today. There's 50 other episodes on the podcast that you can listen to, and I'm starting to build the YouTube library up. That's at Paul's Cutlass Classroom on YouTube. So there's, I guess, probably about 15 or so videos, and I'll keep building content there. So jump on over there, check that out, subscribe, and comment and offer me your feedback on those topics as well. I'd appreciate it. And then to those loyal listeners and subscribers out there, welcome back. Thanks for your support and feedback. I get feedback, I get emails, and I try to work those into future topics. So one of my goals with, I just worked on and submitted the manuscript for the third edition of the Chief Petty Officer's Guide. It's been 5 years, so the Naval Institute, revises those, or we take a look at them every 5 years. So when I worked at the Naval Institute, there was a realization that we had a Blue Jackets manual, we had a Chief Petty Officer's Guide, but I saw a gap. So working with the Naval Institute, I wrote a Petty Officer's Guide, and I took a lot of the content out of the Chief Petty Officer's Guide, which I thought was direct level, small team leadership, rolled that into that. And that provided me the opportunity to now take Chief Petty Officer's Guide and elevate it beyond just the divisional chief kind of deck plate unit level perspective. So we've built that content in. We'll take you to Welcome to the Mess from initiation all the way up to your journey to possibly be the MCPON or COCOM or the SEAC, senior enlisted leader. So I'm excited for that. That'll probably take about a year to get through the editing process, but no need to wait for that to come out to talk about one of the areas I wrote, which was preparing for new positions as a senior enlisted leader. So it's not just preparing for the position, it's succeeding while you're in the position as well. So you're going to find, as a Chief Petty Officer, if you don't realize already, you're going to have a point where you're going to make a career path decision, right? So you're going to find, hey, I'm more technically minded or technically focused, or I enjoy the technical management side more. And you'll either stay in your rating and progress up as a Mass Chief in your rating, perhaps get into some rating community management or health, or you can select to go to the LDO, Chief Warrant Officer route, and get into technical management and leadership. The other path is going to take you on the path towards senior enlisted leadership, or what I think is the organizational management and leadership role. And that's the program we're going to talk a little bit about today. So with me today, back again, is Force Mass Chief Toby Ruiz. You might recognize him. He was a guest on the episode Advice on Becoming a Kick-Ass Public Speaker. He now serves as the Command Mass Chief for the Navy's Leader and Ethics Center up in Rhode Island. And in that role, him and his team shaped the leadership development continuum for all enlisted sailors in the Navy. So it's a really cool gig. It's a great opportunity to influence. I'm jealous of that position because never had the chance to do it, nor did I want to move to Rhode Island, frankly. But he's served in a bunch of CMC roles. He's seen it. He's been on boards and a variety of things. So I thought he'd be a great guest to dive in this topic and offer advice on this path. So Toby, welcome back to the Cutlass Podcast. How's everything going with you?
Hey, brother, things are going great here. And wow, I was just listening in, 50 episodes and building, and it's just, amazing the continued work you're doing for all of us to continue to build on those leadership foundations. So it's been a little while since we did the public speaking one. So thanks for having me back, man. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that one's gotten some great reach and offered some great stuff. So, all right, so let's start with fundamentals. So what is a senior enlisted leader, right? And I know we're going to do some history, and where did this kind of role evolve from? It wasn't always just senior enlisted leader or SEL. That's kind of the modern version of it. So I'm going to throw it back over to you to give us a little background on that position and how it grew into what it is today.
Absolutely. I'm gonna give you a little history lesson of it, if you will, entertain me here for a couple minutes. I don't want to be long winded, but you know, we've had CSELs, command senior enlisted leaders, if you will, since I think the evolutions of chief petty officers, and just haven't, given it a formal title, if you will. They were always assumed to be your most senior person of that commander unit you were with, the oldest chief on board, kind of the father figure, if you will, to kind of help crews out in their day-to-day business. If we go back to 1958 for a second, of course, we all know public law was enacted and created the E8s and E9s in the Navy. In November of 58, we had roughly 149 Master Chiefs selected, and we had, a little over 900 brand new senior chiefs selected. And that was kind of the birth of the super chiefs, if you will. If you fast forward to January of 67, McPon Del Black, he was appointed the first senior enlisted advisor, if you will, to the CNO to CNP. And that title changed, obviously, a couple months later to McPon. But basically, that person was the spokesperson to address all the issues of enlisted personnel to the highest positions in the Navy, and also addressed some of these things to Congress as well. If you move forward to the early 70s, Admiral Zumwalt, if you remember, became our CNO, and he was, given credit for reforming a lot of the things that we, kind of enjoy in the Navy today, personnel policies to help improve quality of life items and easing other tensions, whether racial, social tensions across the force. And in previous podcasts that you have mentioned, we talk about these Z-grams that he put out to help make some of these changes. And one of the things that came of this was that he released a Z-gram that created what's called a CNO CPO advisory board. This board was made up of 8 master chiefs, senior chiefs across the fleet that would get together with the MCPON to advise the CNO on all of these things that are going on. And this is now, that was then the very beginning of what we now know today as MCPON's leadership mess of all the flag officer CMCs across our entire Navy. Z-Gram 95, which was released in early 71, had announced the creation of Master Chief Petty Officers of the Command. And what this did now is it replaced that CPO advisory board. The leadership mess, if you will, grew a little bit to around 25 or so. And now those positions now are what we know as our fleet and our force master chiefs across the Navy. So again, still focusing on these enlisted issues, but also now identifying specific areas across the fleet and across our Navy where to help address. Later on that century there, we created what was then also called the Master Chief Petty Officers of the Command, designating those down now to individual units. And then later, of course, we know it as now the Command Master Chief Program. And, we're hundreds and hundreds full with this job now. And the job of those CMCs are exactly what we do today. Assist the commanding officer in monitoring the morale, the training, the development, good order and discipline, and job satisfaction amongst all of our sailors. To be the sounding board for those commanding officers, and probably just as important, to be that one, to be the truth and power, to be able to tell the CO some things they may not want to hear, but it's for the better of all. The Command Master Chief rating actually became an actual rating in 2001, and then 14 years later, we created Command Senior Chief ratings for your smaller commands. In today's times, we got about 750 Command Master Chiefs and Command Senior Chiefs across the Navy. And while we have them in a lot of the places we need them, not every command still has one. And that's where we also have what we call our Command Senior Enlisted Leaders. These are usually, again, your senior members of the command that are designated by those COs that, hey, you are acting in the role as my Command Master Chief. Designated writing, we send them up here to Enlisted for some training, and then they still fulfill those roles. So, again, a little bit long-winded. Thank you for tolerating me on that, but that's from where we started to where we're at today. Very important position in our Navy ranks.
Yeah, and it grew out of a realization that there wasn't a representation or a perspective that got brought into policy and broader decision-making, which was leading to a lot of dissatisfaction. And of note, it wasn't just the Navy. We weren't the first ones who had that position. It had started with some of the other services, but all the services have one. And now eventually we grew that into the DoD level, the joint level too, with combatant commander, senior enlisted. There's some joint task force jobs, and then ultimately there's the senior enlisted advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and these paths can go all the way up to there. So we'll touch on that. So let's talk about, hey, I'm a person, I'm at that decision making point. What do you find? What would you tell me is the most rewarding thing about serving in those roles, and then what are some of the challenges and frustrations that I would want to consider when making that decision?
Well, I think the most rewarding, and I was a Navy counselor prior to becoming a CMC. And one of the things I loved back then about being an NC was I got to deal with sailors and talk about doing, giving them information, educating them on things that they needed to do to help stay Navy, or for those that chose they wanted to move on in a civilian career afterwards, help prep them for that. And I really loved all those interactions. As I became more senior of a Navy counselor, I then realized, hey, I got NC1s and NCCs who need to do that role. And I'm just kind of the higher level, whether it's bean counting or just kind of the policy making person for that. And I lost touch with that. I kind of lost, I had to let my other NCs be the ones to do that frontline stuff. So when I became a command senior chief, that's why I wanted to join the program. Getting out, interacting every day with those sailors, I think was one of the biggest rewards that I had. A lot of times to be utilized to help solve problems or help our sailors solve problems that they've got. And that was very rewarding to me. Having the ability to be able to talk with my COs and give them advice, give them some of that hard conversations that sometimes, that they don't want to hear, but would definitely impact them. That was always great, especially thoughts that they needed before they would make a decision. When I got up into the senior ranks, I enjoyed a little bit of that autonomy that came with the job as well, being able to, be an extension of the boss, if you will, in communicating, messages and those leadership type of roles. But I think probably the biggest thing that I really enjoyed about, I enjoy about being a CMC is just celebrating sailors, celebrating their successes, celebrating when we as a unit do something very, very effective. We meet missions, we do it well, and to celebrate those successes, I think that's probably one of the biggest rewards that come with the job. At the same time, there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of frustrations that come with this as well. There's a lot of change that goes on. And one of the things that we have to be on top of our game all the time is understanding, quickly learning what is that change, because it's up to the CMC and the CPO mess, if you will, to lead that change, to be able to help get that change and make it done in as smooth a transition as we can to continue what we're doing. Sometimes the relationships aren't always as we want it to be. Relationships amongst our peers, relationships within your mess. Sometimes your CO and XO don't have the same thought patterns that you do, and that kind of puts a strain. So that could be a challenge at times in learning and working around that. Work-life balance sometimes is a little tough. We tell CMCs, hey, there's a lot of times that leadership is needed amongst our ranks, and it's not just a 9-to-5 job. It's a 24/7 job. Being a CMC is hard work, and hard work is authorized. So let's get to it. And I think the last thing frustration wise is that and this is me personally, I think a lot of times when something doesn't go down that I was hoping it would, the way it would go, or the way I kind of planned it, envisioned it, I'm very self-critical. We talked about this during the communications topic. We did a few episodes back where I'm very self-critical, and I always wonder and I always question myself, what could I have done better? Where did I drop the ball on this? And even if I didn't, you still get that sense of responsibility, that sense of accountability, if you will, to always try to make sure that doesn't happen. So that can be frustrating at times as well.
Yeah, I'll offer, for my personal experience, all the rewarding things you've talked about. Absolutely. My big thing was, I just felt myself wanting to be this kind of policy agent and kind of change. There were things, I grew up as a Navy nuke, as you know, and there were things, I found myself wanting to vocalize kind of recommendations to cultural barriers to change and things like that. So the ability to influence policy, whether at the command level or the force level or the TICOM or the fleet or the Navy-wide level, that impacted the quality of work and quality of life of sailors and their families, was a big thing that drove me, and one of the most rewarding things you can do. At the same time, that comes with challenge, right? Because as you do move up in the organization, there are other people that are shaping that, right? And to your point, not everyone agrees with your perspective, right? You are bringing a perspective and an experience set into that discussion and that governance structure, but there's others as well. There's people that own money. There's people that are into politics at the political level. There's other stakeholders that you don't understand their perspective. So you come in as a champion, just realize the frustrating thing is there's other people on side of that other line, necessarily not after the same things you're after. And then the other thing I found rewarding for me, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I wanted just to chime in on that while it was fresh in my mind. And you were absolutely right. As a young CMC, I'm a very emotional kind of guy. The glass is half full. You try to see the goodness out of everything. And as you get more senior, as you discussed in there, and especially when it comes to policies or giving feedback, things like that, a lot of times those decisions are based more on historical data, based more on projections, the number side versus the feeling side. And, that took a little bit for me to understand and grow into that as I was starting to get into more senior positions. And that can be hard sometimes, especially as you said, when you're championing for something you think is a benefit for all, but you have to look at all other aspects to that as well. And the other thing that you had mentioned is that one of the biggest compliments I will always have of being a CMC, I think, is when your CO will not make a decision or your boss will not make a decision without your input. When I was a Force Master Chief Nav I-4, my boss, Admiral Kohler, specifically stated that he would not make any decision on something without, I want to hear what's on Force's mind. And that's a very big compliment because he doesn't have to listen to me. He didn't have to hear, a lot of things we talked about. And to your other point, there were a lot of things we disagreed on. And even though I gave that, my side of it, my counsel, if you will, he decided to go in the other direction. And that's absolutely fine. Just the compliment there that he wanted to hear me out and make sure that, I was able to offer what I could, is also a big reward in that aspect as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other one I wrote down was, for me as a nuke, I was stovepipe, right? So I had done aircraft carriers, done the bull nuke thing. I had done a prototype instructor. There wasn't much career position diversity, right? So applying for the Command Master Chief program now made worldwide assignability available to me. Some people don't want that. Some people want to stay in one location, but I got to see a variety of things over my career. I got to go to Japan, Guam. I got to serve in an aviation squadron. I got to do some really cool things I would have never done as a Navy nuke. So I thought that was a rewarding part of it that thing people should consider when they're doing this. And one more barrier, again, as you move up, one of the things I realize is like at the deck plate level or the unit level, man, day to day, you could do something, you could have career development boards, you could see teams doing stuff and know you left that ship every day or that squadron knowing like, man, we're doing stuff daily. People are making things readiness, they're generating readiness, or we rewarded people daily and you could see an immediate daily impact. You start moving up, now you get into bureaucracy, now you get into policy, creating requirements, right? So things move slower. So again, if you're impatient like me and many others in these positions, because I think we are, classic alphas, we're motivated, we want things happen. You got to be prepared that things don't happen. They may even an initiative you might have, it's going to be a baton you typically pass off to your predecessor. So you'll trade that off as you move up. So, all right. So real quick, so thinking about the program. So the program does get criticism, right? There are people that frankly shit talk it. I'll say, for lack of a better term, I don't think they understand it. And some of it is they are political positions, quote unquote. So Why do you think that perception exists that, hey, we're just politicians? I'll never go into it. It's too political. And then what would you say to that chief, senior chief, or mass chief who immediately dismisses the career path with that perception?
Yeah, you know what? I haven't heard that as much anymore. That's always a talking point, though. Is oh yeah, you guys are just political. Uh, no such thing as a CMC. There's no such thing as a political position. I think people sometimes think that when you become a command mass chief, a C cell, that we become a politician, or maybe we're a puppet for what Big Navy, thinks that everybody wants to hear. And sometimes, because there are certain times that we have to talk in a very certain way to appease everyone, to be proper, if you will. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Do we have to know how to communicate properly? Absolutely. But we all get that training en route from, the enlisted leader development, where we do from first class to chief, the SEA. We refine that, and everybody needs to go to the SEA if you want to continue upward mobility. So there's a time to communicate properly. Absolutely. There's a time, place with that, but it's like that in every position we do. Whether you're that deck plate chief, all the way up again to CMC and above, we all have those times that we have to properly communicate. It's not a political thing. And again, we like to call it here the RIP effect. We communicate to establish relationships, and again, we have to know how to talk within those relationships. But in those conversations, the I part of that is we influence. We make sure that we do everything we can to influence a decision that's about to be made, or influence others on why a decision was made. And then, of course, we also, as part of that communication, the P part of that is the perspectives, making sure that all perspectives are covered. And again, some of those perspectives are things that sometimes people are not going to want to hear, whether it's the CPO mess that is learning about a new policy, and we have to be able to get it to their understanding on and answer the whys for them, or whether it's to that boss or to leadership that you're trying to advocate something for, and they may not want to hear it from that perspective you bring in. That's, I think, where a lot of the mix-up between political and non-political conversations are. So we always try to debunk that theory. Being a CMC has nothing to do with being a politician. There are other times we're going to have to behave that way. Yeah, maybe, but more times than not, it's more about being real to influence those relationships that influence perspective.
Yeah. So I wrote down ambassadorship, right? So you're representing your organization, right? You're not just representing your boss, right? So yeah, the way you represent that organization, I don't care what level you are, a chief, a master chief, a senior chief, right? One of the hats you wear is an ambassador of the Navy, right? So you're not going to go out and speak in certain ways to certain audiences, right? So the other difference, I think, is, I've always said this, I think it is a political position, right? So, and I'll read it. So politics it's from the ancient Greek, affairs of the cities. It's defined as the set of activities that are associated with making decisions in groups or other forms of power relations among individuals, such as the distribution of resources or status. So yes, I did play a role in Navy politics, right? I was a representative of that enlisted perspective into the decision-making machine, right? And you want that. That's why that program came up. That's why we got into a bad space prior to the advent of these communities, because the enlisted voice wasn't represented. That constituency wasn't represented in the senior decision-making circles of the Navy and the other services. So when it comes to politics, there is a politic role, but I would offer there's a politic role for every senior enlisted leader, right? So that mass chief running a department is doing politics on behalf of the sailors to their department head. Yep. So I think where they get it confused is politically correct. So they think you have to be politically correct. So let's not confuse being political and being in politics of the military with politically correct. And some people just don't want to do that, and that's okay, right? That's the kind of do that technical management lane. But I get it. Some people can be politically correct to a fault, right? They won't tell the truth. They'll start to think differently about, my career could be at risk or this and that. That's when you get into a bad spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great clarification there that you put in there about being politically correct. You know, you can give the worst news that you can, and as long again you're the way that you communicate it out, the way that you talk about it, and that's why again we stress so much about communication. There's a time and a place, and again, I many many chiefs are already being political and they don't even realize it. It just again in certain situations that they have to be in, and again, it's not a bad thing. But again, there's a correct time and place for that, and always want to fall back that you know we can all play those respective roles as we need to. The most important thing, as you said, is getting the right word out and not watering down the message, whether up or down the chain of command that we have to.
Yeah, and there's also some criticism from the wardroom side, right? So I've seen that, like, they don't fully understand the role. They think you're trying to be the second in charge and trying to displace the XO or the deputy or something. What's been your experience with that?
Not too much, actually. What is interesting that I have noticed is that sometimes, members of the wardroom, department heads in particular, or maybe some of your senior division officers, they they try to get in to talk to the captain or to try to share ideas or coming up with something, and they can't get into the captain to see them. And I think one of the important things is if they see you, the CMC, out and about, and they will want to talk to you, because guess who you have the ear of and have more access to probably than they do. And so that could be a very big strength used for both, if again done in the correct way, to hey, CMC, I was thinking about this, want to talk to the captain about that, what do you think he or she would say? I think that's an important position to be able to have, and maybe break down some of those particular barriers before they get the chance to talk to the captain, or maybe I can go sound the captain out for those respective individuals. So I don't think they ever see it as a hostile takeover as much as, hey, maybe I can use some of this sage guidance as well from the CMC.
Yeah, and I think, some are better than others at the role, right? And, some officers, as young officers or XOs, have a bad experience with the command master chief, and then that shapes their perception. So,
Yeah.
again, that's one of those things. So, all right. So we've talked a little bit about overview. Let's get into kind of some of the roles and responsibilities. So how's it being a CMC different from being a departmental LCPO?
Well, I think being a CMC now, you're no longer again in your specialty that you grew up in. Now you are command level. Everything in that command is under your purview now. And if you're a CMC, you are not just the advocate and the spokesperson for the enlisted person. Everybody at your command, and that includes the wardroom that we were just talking about. Every sailor on board that platform is your sailor, regardless if they're enlisted or their officer. Although, again, you're no longer in your source rate, no longer in that community that you may have grown up in or that primary job. I would say, though, that as a CMC, don't underestimate the possible need or the opportunity that may arise where you need to fall back on some of those routes as well. And I think back to like when we had the Cole terrorist attack. One of the big stories there was the fact that the CMC, James Parlier, was a prior corpsman and was a significant, role player after the hit in helping care for his sailors. And, they set up an aft battle stations to be able to medically look after his particular sailors that were in his need. When I was a command senior chief, I would have to stand watch underway from time to time as officer of the deck underway. That's not the norm, but because when you have shortages, you have in situational awareness of what's going on in your command, you may be called upon to come back and fill some of those roles. So never lose your roots, if you will, as part of that. regardless of what command you're going to, and I, like you, Paul, I've served in, this is now my sixth community as a CMC, over 8 CMC tours. And there's a lot of learning that goes with this, but you should always be familiar with all the work centers, all the divisions, your codes, whatever you're calling it at your commands, to know what they are doing and where they're at in your commands, and visit them often. Keep up with what they're doing, because their missions change just like ours do as well. But it shows, one, that you care for them. It shows that you're interested in them and what they're doing, and allow them that opportunity, if you will, to show off to you. Hey, check out what we can do. Check out some of the cool things we're doing here. And again, then that also helps you translate what they're doing to the bigger picture of the command, and be able to make sure that everybody else understands that as well.
Okay. Yeah. So one thing I've mentioned other episodes. So you're definitely moving and stepping away from the deck plate each level we go up. So I know we love the t-shirts with deck plate leader, and that's great. But once you get, you make senior chief, I say you take a step away from the deck plate. When you go in that department LCPO role, right, your aperture opens, your influence targets change, who you work for changes, who you shape to influence changes, and your view, right? You should learn about all the ratings within that command, right? So you are opening your scope. And then again, as a command master chief, at the unit level at least, the aperture has to open again. So now I'm looking at command-wide process, command-wide policies, not just units, right? Not just my rating. How do I shape and assess unit culture and climate, right? How do I help coach my boss, who's a commanding officer? And that's a different thing too, right? A relationship as you go up with a more senior officer. You might have worked, as a division chief, maybe with a lieutenant, and then you move up to an LCPO job, working for an 0405, right? That comfort level, you have to get used to that, but it comes over time. And then next thing you know, you're working for an 06. It's different, right? They're more experienced, so there's not this same relationship you had with a young division officer. So that changes as well. And then I think, and you mentioned this, your influence charge change, right? So instead of the LPO and the division officer at the command level, now XO, CO, department heads, right? I'm worried about the functioning of the entire wardroom, right? I'm worried about the functioning of the entire chief's mess. I'm worried about the relationship between the wardroom and the chief's mess. So I think being able to see the command in its component parts and how they come together is a different perspective you got to change. And you should start to be seeing some of that, I think, right, as an LCPO, because you're coming in the meetings usually facilitated by command master chief. And then, again, your relationship up is now with an ISIC command master chief, right, who's, external to. So there's a lot that changes, I think, at that point. And then the responsibilities, right, you're on a bunch of different boards and panels that are outlining commands and instructions and things like that. I love that point about Jim Parlier. Like, I had him on an episode of the Cutlass podcast. He talks specifically about that experience. I had to do it too. My first tour on the USS Juneau, engineering department was in a bad spot. My commanding officer was a 06 doing his post carrier XO ride, getting ready to track to carrier command, nuke trained. And he's like, "Hey, Master Chief, I need you to go nuke on me and come down the propulsion plant." So I was able to, leverage that experience, without being overbearing and taking over per se, but it can happen where you find yourself being leveraged for that rating expertise.
I think one of the other things that you talked about with relationships again, Paul, is that at the command level also you get exposure to everybody on board. And so when it comes time to either influence change, help lead a change, you find those members on board, and they could be, a couple from engineering, a couple from, supply, wherever they're at. You also have that ability, because if you're out and reaching out to them at the deck plate level, to be able to solicit them, to help them help you get some of that messaging across, as your trusted agents, as your allies. It makes, change. It makes communication a lot better, especially if they're in tune with you on what you're trying to influence. And again, at each level, you're right, the communication part is going to change. It's not you don't have to be politically correct about it as much as just knowing how to properly communicate it. So
Yeah, that's a huge piece. I mean, the communication skills, and we'll get into that in a little bit.
yeah.
So, what's the career path for a senior enlisted leader look like? Where's it start, and where can it go? And I know this could be a long discussion, but if you can just distill it down into big kind of steps, I guess.
So normally we become CSAILs in one of three ways. Either you stay in rate. There are some communities, as I talked about earlier, that they do not have rated command master chiefs, either because of size or, there's a couple races that need that technical expert just as much as the leadership side. So they stay with CSAILs, if you will. So that's one way. If you're a senior chief, you can apply into the command senior chief program. And if you're selected there, you're basically doing the same roles, if you will, as a CMC, just at a smaller command level. But you still have that same positional authority and fall in the organization the way we do that. And then from command senior chief, then you would promote up to command master chief. That's the second part of that. Or we have some that grow up all the way from E1 all the way up to master chief within their rates. They do their tours there. They do a couple tours as a master chief, kind of, I'm paying back to my community, trying to influence there where I can, before they realize now, hey, maybe it's time for that next step, getting away from the senior departmental LCPO, and let's instead go the command route so they can laterally convert from their source rate, wherever they are as an E9, over to command master chief. Those are normally the three ways we see it. Chiefs of the boat, very similar to command senior chief on the submarine side. They would still do their role as a chief of the boat, normally as a senior chief, and then promote their way up once they're done with that tour. How you get there really depends on a few things, but in particular, again, how long have you been in the Navy? How long have you been either promoted to E8 or E9, if you will, and how much time you have on the backside to be able to want to serve in some of these types of positions. And then even as a CMC, your career progression, normally you'll start at the 05 level for your CO, your deck plate level, if you will, tactical, and then kind of work your way up. Maybe then you do a tour with an 06 or a couple of tours with an 06, get some more of that experience before coming up into the flag ranks. Sometimes we kind of diversify around. So again, Paul, you and I both have kind of done this in our ways, where we jump from community to community. I've been with surface, I've done aviation, I've done information warfare. DC is considered a community. I will consider them that, before playing with the Marines and now here in the educational realm. So if you have time to be able to maybe try a different community out and learn how to lead in that group, that can present yourself as well. Some people would rather stay closer to their source ratings, if you will. We have a lot of command master chiefs that were former corpsmen, and so they stay leading in the corpsman side of the world, whether hospitals, whether large deployable medical units, Marines, and so forth like that. So several different ways, I think, again, based on how long have you currently been in service and eligible for these leadership type of ranks and roles. And then also, what do you want to do with that time? What is your goal? Do you want to be a force master chief? Do you want to be a fleet somewhere? Do you want to make more impact in a specific community? That all goes into that formula, if you will.
Okay, awesome. And then obviously, you get up, and then there's the opportunities as you move up. Eventually, you could be a combatant commander, SEL, serving for PACOM, or Indo-PACOM now, UCOM, those kind of things, or the senior enlisted advisor, the chairman. And although we're focusing on Navy here, this kind of general, each service has their specific senior enlisted leader program outlines and requirements, but these kind of career paths and general paths up are pretty consistent. So,
and the most important thing with that, Paul, is that, again, what we call our NTMS, our Navy Talent Management System for the CMC ranks, a lot of it, you are brought into those conversations because of what you have done at your current commands. And I can't stress that enough to CMC, CSELs, wherever you're at, whatever job you're in, every job needs a good senior enlisted leader. Every command deserves a damn good CMC. So wherever you're at, lead, do what you're supposed to do there. Let your work, let your results, and let your reputation dictate then what could be in the future for you.
Absolutely. So here I am. I'm a new chief petty officer back in 96, 7 time frame. And I was doing a checkout. I was on the USS Mississippi at the time. We were decommissioning. So I had about a year as a chief under my belt, but I didn't lead a division because we were in this crew work, right? We were in sections. And I was doing my checkout interview with the commanding officer and, doing the typical stuff. And then he looked at me and said, one day you're going to be a command mass chief. And I'm like, okay, my young chief brain. I was like, I wasn't even bought into the Navy at this point, believe it or not, right? I had not re-enlisted again. So I'm like, I definitely wasn't a career dig it at that point, lifer. So I'm like, yeah, whatever. This is to myself, right? Sure enough, right? So clearly he saw something in me, right? Some attributes. So as we're looking around, what are the attributes the program looks for? What's the knowledge level the program looks for? So that candidates who are thinking about it can evaluate their strength in these areas. What are those kind of things and the advice you would offer for knowledge, skills, and abilities to be successful in this program?
Well, so I think at a unit level, probably one of the most important things we do as command master chiefs is leading our CPOs, leading CPO messes. You hear the old saying that chiefs are the backbone of the Navy. Chiefs are the ones who run the Navy. But we can't do that if we don't have a united mess. And again, those that have been inside of a mess know that sometimes we could go in very different directions if we just kind of let them run amok. So I think one of the first things that any CMC has to be able to learn to do is to be able to lead that mess, get them in the direction that we need to go to make our units successful, and that we can meet command mission. I think one of the other things that CMCs have to be able to do is what we talked about earlier, communicating with that triad, having a battle rhythm with your CO, knowing what their priorities are, and then being able to talk to them and make sure that everybody from your most junior sailor all the way up can understand what those are. And again, within talking with your COXO, we preach a lot here on the importance of radical candor. Being able to provide feedback and provide things that they need to hear that they probably don't want to hear, but you got to do it to make sure they understand the scope of the decision they're about to make on something. It's not being unprofessional. It's not being, let's see how much I can get away with to piss the captain off. It's nothing like that at all. It's simply making sure they understand that and that they hear that before that goes. So I think that's important as well. Being a good listener, you have to be able to listen to what those problems are around you and not immediately jump into something where you think you know the problem when you don't have the full background. That's, I think, another important thing that CMCs have to do at all levels, but especially at the unit level. Some of those knowledges that we should have. What's our mission of our unit that we're at? What is our main job that we're supposed to do, and making sure everybody understands that. Knowing what the capabilities are as well to be able to meet that mission. And then I think another role for CMC, the beauty of what we got, is we can just assess. Now knowing what our capabilities are, what we should be doing, are we able to do that? And if we are able to do that, all the different units, divisions and rates on our Navy able to do that, then, and we're doing it well, why are we doing it well? What's making us on top of our game? And then I think just as important is, what are we not doing well? And what do we need to be focusing on more? And again, back to training, back to readiness that we should be tracking. That's something we really need to pay attention to, not only identify it, but then work to get it done. And I think the last big one I would talk about here is just our ability to network. Chiefs are good networkers. We should be good networkers. Command Master Chiefs, you have to know who's who around you at any given time, because you're going to be given situations that you're not going to be able to handle inside. So who can you contact on the outside to help you get through some of these things, to take care of your sailors and take care of your units?
Yeah, absolutely. on top, it's a huge communication job. It's a huge job of influence. So back to knowing influence, how to wield it appropriately, wielding all your communication skills. Small groups, you're going to talk to large groups, you're going to talk up and out, down and in, right? So if you're not comfortable with public speaking, you got to be able to write good emails, communicate with people, you got to be able to listen to your points. So you've got to work those communication skills. And then I'll offer, as you move up, again, growing your aperture, right? So if you're currently a unit CMC right now and you're thinking and kind of getting in a position, or you're on an aircraft carrier, right? You're now at that tactical operational cusp. You could be a force mass chief or, something broader, but what do you know about that broader TICOM organization? Do you know how a flag staff is organized, right? So you can learn these things. Do you understand the political and policy level, the DOD and joint structure? And you do get education on this, right? You'll eventually go to it, but there's nothing that says you can't learn that stuff now. You got to understand strategic thinking and learn how to back it out and look at an organization, not just as the people, but as the components that make up. And that sounds cold and sterile, but it's a skill and an attribute you need. It doesn't mean you can't connect with people when you see them, but as you move up, you're going to spend less and less time with individual sailors and more time with leaders and broader groups of people. And then I think you got to learn things like, okay, how does manning and the broader processes, management processes, right? How is manning and manpower? How does that work? How do I, even at the unit level, right? How do I ensure my unit is manned, or how do I send a demand signal to get manning, all the way up to how the Navy prioritizes manning and buys people and distributes them. And that can go into like supply, training, and education. How does the Navy do that on the large scale? That's the world you're in now. The shore is managed differently. Shore installation management is a different animal. So learning about those kind of things now and how the Navy does that. And then finally, I think this is huge, budget. So the planning, programming, budgeting, execution process, again, back to great thoughts and things. Nothing gets done unless it's, made into a requirement, and that requirement is resourced with money. You can have all the greatest idea. And as you know, up there, you can only train so many students. You can only get things done with the SEA. But if that thing is not resourced, it's dead on arrival. So I encourage you to start learning about the broader Navy to prepare for these jobs.
And if I may add one last thing to that, Paul, and exactly right, especially about the money side. But as you continue learning, and I know that you advocate for this all the time, no matter how senior you get, no matter how high up, the chain, the pecking order you would get, you never stop learning. And I'll tell you that could have not been one of my bigger learning things when I became the Force Master Chief of Naval Information Forces. You got a dumb signalman turned NC, then goes CMC, and now I'm the Force Master Chief of Nav I4. Holy crap. There were many times I can remember that boss is going in to get a brief on a particular piece of equipment, or your boss at Fleet Forces wants to know how this is going to affect something or another, and I had absolutely zero idea about. But again, back to the networking, hey, I can call that, hey, you need to come to my office now, you need to come brief me up on this piece of equipment, what do I need to know, what do I need to advocate for? And you should always be learning that. No matter how top of your game you think you are, there's something you don't know, and that you have to be open to learning it. And I cannot thank enough the Master Chiefs, Senior Chiefs, and even junior sailors that have taught me many things that, I thought I knew, I had no clue about, but I had to know it quickly because I had to be smart to give bosses, a recommendation or a way ahead on something. So never stop learning, lifelong learning all the way, each and every day.
Yes. And then, back it down again for the unit level, just to emphasize this, but you better know like military personnel manual, right? You better know all the major instructions. You don't have to have those things memorized, but you better know where the policy is that governs every bit of sailor quality of work and quality of life. The advancement manual, you better be familiar with it. The evaluation manual, you better be familiar with it, right? So as a young chief, or even as a first class, pulling those resources out every now and then and just reading over them, refreshing yourself, right? Keeping up to the changes. Those are the things that I'm telling you, your commanding officer, your department head, they're not in those reading those. So you've got to be the expert
Yep.
Of knowing where the content is, why it applies, and then you take your experience, and that's how you work it into the nuance, right? So yeah, it may say something in black and white, you know it, but you help your boss figure out when you can get to yes when you can, where you can work in the great area, and you definitely keep them away from the red lines. So again, taking time to unfortunately, we don't test our senior chiefs and mass chiefs anymore, right? We don't make them do military requirements and things like that. You used to have to learn those things and kind of test your knowledge and show, yeah, I know where all these policies are, but you're going to have to learn on those things. So, all right, Toby, I think that'll wrap it for this episode. Man, we've covered a ton. We could keep going, but I'll work some of that into a later info. If people want to learn more about the program, or they want to get in touch with you or NLEC about this, what do you where can they do that?
So we most common sites to come to www.netc.navy.mil/NLEC, NELEC. That's the basic site you can get over to us, and then it'll take you in whatever direction you want to go, whether it's for Command Senior Enlisted Leaders, whether it's for our Navy's ELD program, wherever leadership and ethics you want to know about. That's the best place to start. And again, Paul, as always, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate these talks. I appreciate you considering me for these. I will tell everybody to kind of close it. There's no better time than right now to be a command master chief, command senior chief, a chief of the boat, a senior enlisted leader in our Navy. This is we need good leaders to continue moving our Navy forward. And, if there's any questions or any thoughts or ruminants that you need dispelled, please reach out to somebody so we can help talk you through that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Toby. Again, it's great to catch up. We're going to wrap and do another episode here on coaching and feedback, but that's cool. I love it. Hey, I'm proud of the work you're doing. And again, I'm excited for you, right? It is cool to be able to shape the, not just the senior enlisted community's education, but you're in there with the flag, the soon to be flag officers, the senior commanders, senior commanding officers and stuff like that. So congratulations on that, and take full advantage of that. So I hope for everyone watching, this has offered you some great insights on this opportunity and this kind of potential career path in your leadership portfolio, especially in the Navy or in the military. And I think this is leading self kind of category of things, right? So this is strengthening yourself and reflecting on your own skill sets about where you want to go with this. So that'll do it for this episode of the Cutlass Podcast. As always, to learn about this topic and others, you can check out the Chief Petty Officer's Guide, the Petty Officer's Guide. I already mentioned the YouTube channel that's out there as well. This video will be on there, and there's other videos as well. And then if you like what you hear, subscribe, share this content, help me get the word out to those who can use it. Again, this is Paul Kingsbury. Keep that leadership cutlass sharp, then take what you learn and go out and make a positive difference for the teams that you have influence over. We'll see you in the next episode.